The star boundary is vast and dangerous. Not to mention the star boundary, even in the star territory, there is also this kind of natural gravity field. In a certain place, the gravity is several times or more than 10 times that of ordinary places, which can often make people caught off guard and suffer a big loss. But the natural gravity field here is even more frightening. Even the cultivation level of third-order Void King realm like Xianxia is stuck in place and cannot move. One can imagine how powerful it is. That is definitely a gravitational force thousands of times higher than that of ordinary places. The natural gravitational field is extremely scarce, and the conditions for its formation are also very harsh. Although Xianxia has encountered it before, he can break free of those gravitational fields with only a little power, but here. His face gradually became dignified, constantly urging the strength in his body, but he could only move slowly, and it was impossible to fly. Looking up, there is a shadow of the sky at a location that does not know how high. If you can't fly at such a high distance, it is impossible to go up. Looking around again, Xianxia's eyes narrowed slightly. This canyon is actually not long, only about 100 meters long, but just below this canyon, there are white bones, monster-shaped bones, and also humanoids. Most of them have fallen to pieces and scattered on the ground. Only a handful of them can barely maintain their original shape. There was even a corpse, apparently not long after he died, and even the blood nearby hadn't dried up. The ground was covered with minced meat, and the internal organs sputtered far away, looking terrible. This person is obviously the Maplewood City martial artist who entered the Five Colors Treasure Tower this time, just like Xianxia. When he flew over this canyon, he was accidentally pulled down, but without Xianxia's means, he ended up falling into a dusty end. Before this person died, he must be very unwilling. Xianxia thought secretly, after all, he has already cultivated to the level of the Void King realm. Who would have thought that one day he would fall to death somewhere? If this method of dying is spread, I'm afraid it will make everyone laugh. But how can the gravity here be so terrible? Xianxia was puzzled. He had encountered natural gravitational fields before, but none of them could compare with this place. As a last resort, he used the 5 elements indestructible sword, and the colorful rays of light wrapped him. After a while, he performed the dragon transformation secret technique again, finally allowing him to walk slowly at the speed of a turtle under this canyon. After half a cup of tea, Xianxia dispersed the 5 elements indestructible sword and dragon transformation secret technique, panting, and slumped on the ground. Maintaining these 2 secret techniques for a long time. The consumption is great for him. But the effect is minimal, and the gain is not worth the loss. He simply no longer wastes his power. I won't be trapped in this ghost place, will I? A sad thought came to Xianxia's mind. After a while, he frowned again, a look of surprise appeared on his face. No, the spiritual energy here. He suddenly discovered that the world's spiritual energy here is extremely rich. In Star Boundary, he doesn't know what kind of cave heaven paradise has a rich world's spiritual energy. After all, he hadn't been in the Star Boundary for a long time, and he had never been to the headquarter of any big sect. However, the world's spiritual energy here is not comparable to that of Blue Feather Sect's headquarter, nor is it comparable to the cave mansion he rented in Maplewood City. The world's spiritual energy here is so strong that it almost exceeds the limit of Xianxia's imagination. Sitting here, there is no need to perform cultivation technique, the surrounding spiritual energy will dig into the body spontaneously, and after a while, the strength that Xianxia had consumed before will be restored. Since Xianxia entered the 5 Colors Treasure Tower, he felt that the spiritual energy around the world was extremely thin, whether it was the first or second floor. Suddenly there was a range of such a strong world's spiritual energy, which makes it difficult for people not to care. Moreover, because of the terrifying natural gravitational field here, all the world's spiritual energy are firmly absorbed in places less than 3 feet from the ground, and they cannot spread out at all. This created a spectacle. Below this canyon, this space 3 feet from the ground is full of spiritual energy like a thick mist, and there are even signs of spiritual energy turning into silk. Xianxia had not paid much attention to the accident before, and he was taken aback when he observed carefully at this moment. This underground, is there any treasure? A thought uncontrollably emerged in Xianxia's mind. Only this speculation can explain the weirdness of this place. Thinking of this, Xianxia couldn't help feeling a little excited. He braced himself and stood up, urging the strength in his body. With his 5 fingers together, dozens of golden blood threads emerged leisurely, and those golden blood threads were twisted together and gradually turned into a drill-like existence. With Yang Kai's low shout, the drill-like golden blood spun and bombarded the ground. The next moment, there was a loud noise. Golden light overflows. Dozens of golden blood threads suddenly collapsed, revealing the original appearance again, and could no longer maintain the appearance of the drill, but somewhere on the ground, there was fire and sparks. After a while, Yang Kai stared at a pit the size of a rice grain with wide open eyes, and exclaimed, "So hard?" He can finally confirm that there are definitely treasures underground. Because his observation of the soil on the ground showed that it is basically ordinary soil, but he doesn't know why, there is a layer of invisible power that makes them hard, even the golden blood thread cannot cause too much damage. With a single blow, only the pit the size of a rice grain was left, and in the blink of an eye, the pit disappeared. The ground is leveled again and again. That inexplicable power actually has the ability to repair itself. Yang Kai looked fiery, but helpless. Because if he can't dig the ground, how can he take away the treasure underground? In his current state, even the ground cannot be broken. This completely falls into an endless loop, just like figuring out whether the egg or the chicken came first. If only Xiaoxiao were here. Yang Kai suddenly missed Xiaoxiao ability. The stone puppet clan's natural divine ability is to devour minerals to strengthen their body, but it can also shuttle underground at will without any restriction. If Xiaoxiao hadn't separated from him, Yang Kai could use Xiaoxiao power to let it get into the ground to get the treasures. It's a pity. Yang Kai doesn't know where Xiaoxiao is now. As for the embodiment in mysterious boundary bead, although it is also considered to be of the stone puppet clan, that size is really too big, and its own impurities have not been tempered completely, Yang Kai estimates that it will not be able to show its ability well. When he was full of disappointment, Yang Kai suddenly brightened his eyes and thought of something. He immediately took out the mysterious boundary bead, and his spiritual mind penetrated into it and communicated with the flying bat. Since this little beast is the flying bat, it will not be a problem. If he can use its power. The little beast is a 10th order monster beast, even if it does not have the intelligence comparable to humans, it is not without IQ, simple communication with Yang Kai is not a problem. After a while, Yang Kai cautiously reached out and tapped the mysterious boundary bead. Mysterious light flashed, and the little beast suddenly appeared beside Yang Kai. Yang Kai's expression is solemn, and his divine consciousness has been enveloping the little beast. Once he notices something wrong, he will immediately take it back. After all, the pressure here is really terrifying, and doesn't know if a 10th order monster beast can resist it. If it exploded and died, he couldn't explain it to Mo Zioki. Although the little beast showed its difficult and painful expression after it appeared, the whole body seemed to fall short, and the creak of bones came out of the body, and the little beast's eyes gradually blood red, as if exuding bloodshot. Fortunately, the situation is not too bad. But after a while, it seemed to have adapted to it, and squeaked at Yang Kai twice. Yang Kai was overjoyed and said, "Then it's up to you. If you think the situation is not right, come up quickly, don't force it." The little beast squeaked again, and immediately turned around, sinking into the ground as if it had fallen into the water. However, its speed is not fast, and its body shape gradually disappears after a full breath. Yang Kai waited anxiously on the spot. He had the heart to use his spiritual mind to investigate the situation of the little beast, but he was unable to do anything. As soon as the spiritual mind left the consciousness sea, it was completely deformed by the terrifying gravity. A cup of tea time has passed. A stick of incense time passed. An hour has passed. Yang Kai's face gradually became hard to look. Just when he thought that the little beast's trip was probably hitting a dog with a meat buns, a small head suddenly appeared at his feet. Accompanied by an extremely squeaking sound, the little beast showed its figure again. Yang Kai was overjoyed and hurriedly responded. Urgently urged the divine consciousness, trying to envelop the little beast, taking most of the pressure for it. After the little beast's body had completely drilled out of the ground, Yang Kai stretched out his hand and grabbed it. Somewhere in the mysterious boundary bead, Yang Kai sat cross-legged on the ground, and the little beast lay down on his knees panting, as if experiencing a great battle, somewhat exhausted. "Thank you." Yang Kai gently combed its fur and said comfortingly. Little beast raised its frail eyelids, glanced at him, and there was no movement. After a while, it suddenly got up, then opened its small mouth and spit out a piece of earthy yellow thing about the size of a pigeon egg. Yang Kai stretched out his hand to pick it up. He didn't expect that this thing looked small, but the moment he held it, he staggered and almost fell to the ground, as if 1,000 caddies fell into his hand. He was shocked and quickly ran his power to stabilize his figure, and finally he didn't make a fool of himself. The little beast squeaked, as if a little gloating. Yang Kai didn't care about it, but dignifiedly observed the earthy yellow irregular thing on his hand. After several changes in his expression, he finally exclaimed, "Heavy earth?" What the little beast brought back from the ground was actually a piece of heavy earth. To be continued. Both heavy earth and weak water are treasures of the same level. Both are extremely heavy and have their own characteristics. It is rare for ordinary martial artists to see such treasures, even those with advanced cultivation level. Mozoki had a weak water bead, which seemed to be made from weak water. In Jade Clear Mountain that day, she had activated the power of the weak water bead to confine the young vermilion bird phoenix. Vermilion bird phoenix is the ancient holy spirit. Even the cubs are not easy to provoke. The death of so many people in Jade Clear Mountain that day is the best explanation. After being imprisoned by weak water bead, it was unable to break free. The power of the weak water bead can be seen. Mozoki's background is not small, and it is not surprising that there are such treasures as weak water bead. The heavy earth is the same existence like weak water. Even to some extent, it is more rare and precious than weak water. Because the heavy earth is not only extremely heavy, it can also produce a natural gravity field in the place where it exists, which can be used for martial artists to practice in it, but also can be refined into various treasures. No matter what the artifact, just add some heavy earth, and it can become much heavier, more sturdy, and not easily destroyed. Moreover, there are some magical characteristics in the heavy earth. If the heavy earth is used to make pill refining furnace or item refining furnace, then these furnaces can increase the chance of success when doing pill refining or item refining. The alchemy expert and item refining expert are desperate for heavy earth. Not only that, because of the rich spirituality and the aura of earth attribute of the heavy earth, if you plant spiritual things on the heavy earth, it's enough to shorten the growth cycle of those spiritual things by a lot. In other words, if there is a spirit herbs whose growth period is 100 years, then planted on heavy soil, it may take only 10 years, 5 years, or even shorter time to mature. Such a treasure is not only popular for many martial artists, but also for those big sects. Which sect does not have its own medicine garden? A large number of spirit herbs were cultivated in the medicine garden of each sect, but the more precious the spirit herbs, the longer the growth cycle. Decades and hundreds of years are considered short, and hundreds of years and thousands of years are normal, and there are even tens of thousands of years to mature. These long growth cycles of spirit herbs cannot be cultivated by individual martial artists. There is not much energy and time for it. Only the big sect has this ability. But it will take a lot of time. But once you have a heavy earth, the situation is completely different. A sufficient amount of heavy earth may allow 1 acre of medicine garden to continuously produce all kinds of spirit herbs. The operation is good enough to bring a force to the next level. It's a pity that the rareness of heavy earth also makes people feel desperate. Some of the heavy earth that occasionally appears in this world has also been used to refine some artifacts, and it is not enough to be used in the medicine garden. Yang Kai was able to know the heavy earth, also because he had been cultivating the 5 elements indestructible sword. The 5 elements indestructible sword requires the 5 elements treasure to be cultivated, so he pays a lot of attention to the treasures of the 5 element attributes, and the heavy earth is undoubtedly the supreme treasure of the earth attributes. To a certain extent, it is more precious than the sun's true essence, comparable to mild soul lotus. Although such a small piece of heavy earth the size of a pigeon egg was enough to refine several artifacts, Yang Kai would naturally not be satisfied. He believes that there is more heavy earth deep underground in the canyon, otherwise how could the gravity field here be so terrifying? After thinking for a while, he put down the heavy earth, then took out a lot of recovery spirit pills from his space ring, placed it on the palm of his hand, and handed it to the little beast's mouth. The little beast was exhausted, and it didn't even have the strength to move. But when it saw these spirit pills, the beast's eyes lit up, opened its small mouth, and swallowed them all. Creak! The pill is like a jelly bean, and it rattles when chewed by the little beast. Do you want spirit pills? I have a lot more here. Yang Kai smiled slightly, waved his hand, and took out a dozen jade bottles. The eyes of the little beast became brighter. Very good, help me get this thing underground, as much as the spirit pill. Yang Kai smiled, and pointed his finger at the heavy earth to lure it. The little beast's eyeballs turned, and it was obvious that it was very excited. After a while, the little beast squeaked twice, which was regarded as a response to Yang Kai. In the mysterious boundary bead, it is not affected by the gravity field, so Yang Kai and the little beast meditated and rested in it, and they both recovered extremely quickly. With those miraculous medicines, the little beast was alive again within 2 hours. Yang Kai took it and reappeared in the canyon. Another hour later, the little beast came out of the ground, and Yang Kai was quick to take it back to the mysterious boundary bead to recuperate. After a while, Yang Kai happily got another piece of heavy earth the size of a pigeon egg. This situation repeats itself again and again. 5 days later, the heavy earth in front of Yang Kai piled up. It was already big enough for the tabletop, and it was as thick as 3 fingers. So many heavy earth are simply appalling. You should know, only a piece as big as a fingernail is enough to upgrade an artifact to the next level, and it is a valuable treasure without a market price. The size of tabletop, as thick as 3 fingers. I'm afraid if the top 10 Emperor Senior are here, regardless of their identity, they will shot and snatched it. Yang Kai finally believed that the interior of the 5 Colors Treasure Tower was indeed an ancient place. If not, how can there be such a treasure here? Thanks to the special terrain and terrifying gravity field of this canyon, otherwise such benefits would not have fallen to his hand. I'm afraid others would have taken it away long ago. Anyone who passed through this canyon and found an abnormality had already fallen and died cleanly. Only with the help of the mysterious boundary bead, can Yang Kai escape the disaster and finally gained a huge reward. In fact, he should have thought of it long ago. The anomaly under this canyon is so obvious. Besides the heavy earth, what else can cause it in this world? The little beast is still busy outside, but at this moment the gravity field of the canyon has been weakened to the point where it can almost be ignored. After all, the heavy earth is now basically transferred to the mysterious boundary bead by Yang Kai. The gravity field generated by the heavy earth naturally disappeared. So Yang Kai didn't need to worry about the safety of the little beast. At this moment, with the movement of his mind, he rolled up all the heavy earth in front of him. If it was outside, he absolutely doesn't have this ability. I'm afraid that only the Emperor Senior stage can achieve this level. But here is the mysterious boundary bead, the space inside the mysterious boundary bead, and the mysterious boundary bead itself is Yang Kai's artifact. After some refining, Yang Kai can dominate everything here. It's so hard to fly around with so much heavy earth. Finally, he brought the heavy soil to the vicinity of the medicine garden. Yang Kai looked at the empty medicine garden, smiled knowingly, and used techniques to bury the heavy earth in the medicine garden. In this way, he has a medicine garden that is against the sky. If he sees the seedlings of genius treasure in the future, he can transplant them and shorten the growth cycle. As long as it is not the kind of spirit herbs that will die immediately once transplanted, there is no worry about its survival. Of course, Yang Kai also left a small piece of heavy earth for his own cultivation of 5 elements indestructible sword. After checking his own results, Yang Kai was very satisfied. Then, his figure shook before disappearing. When it reappeared, it was already under the canyon. Without that gravitational field, the rich spiritual energy at the bottom of the canyon finally lost its constraints and escaped upward one after another. No trace of the little beast, it should still be busy underground. Heavy earth is so rare, Yang Kai naturally didn't want to miss a single bit, so he let the little beast work hard in the underground to find it. Naturally, it would be better if it could find it, and it would be fine if it couldn't find it. Anyway, his harvest this time was big enough. He walked up, and after a short while, he came to a bone and stretched out his hand to remove the space ring from the bone's hand. Didn't know how long the skeleton had died here, all flesh and blood had long since disappeared, leaving only white bones and a space ring. Of course Yang Kai had no reason to let go of the wealth of the dead. After searching for it, Yang Kai actually harvested more than 50 space rings beneath this canyon. In other words, there are more than 50 people who accidentally fell down and fell to death because they passed by here. Most of these people should be martial artists of the Void King realm. Except for the martial artist who have just died, the rest should all belong to the Star Soul Palace. After checking a little, Yang Kai suddenly felt a little emotional. Worthy of being a disciple of the Star Soul Palace, everyone's space ring is rich in wealth, not only a large number of source crystals, but also some artifacts, and spirit pill. However, it is a pity that some of the space rings have been left alone for too long, the space ring itself has been damaged, and the contents inside cannot be taken out at all, and even if some things are taken out, they have lost its spirituality and useless. Yang Kai will keep the useful ones and discard the useless ones. Suddenly he harvested more than 300,000 low-grade source crystals and more than 5,000 middle-grade source crystals, but the high-grade source crystals had never been seen. As for the artifact of the Void King grade, there are more than 30 to 40 pieces, and there are 2 pieces of principal source grade. This made Yang Kai couldn't help feeling a little emotional. Last time he went to the black market to secretly sell a lot of spirit pills, only to get about 200,000 source crystals, but now he only have a trip under the canyon, and he have gained so much. All of a sudden, he was relieved of his urgent need that was not well off. After confirming that nothing was missing, Yang Kai stood contentedly and waited. Not long after, the little beast burrowed out of the ground from a certain place and flew in front of Yang Kai. Opened its mouth, and spit out something. Yang Kai took a look and found that there was no heavy earth, and he was a little disappointed. But looking closely at these things, he became rejoiced again. Earth vein bead? There are so many earth vein bead? This time all the things the little beast found from the ground were earth veins bead. The earth veins are the product of the rich world's spiritual energy to a certain extent, which is the reason all the sect headquarters are bold in the place where earth veins is available, so that the disciples under the sect can cultivate easier. And the stronger the sect, the better the earth veins it occupies, and those of the small sects can only occupy some minor earth veins. Every year, there are many sect families who fought against each other because they want the land with earth veins, causing numerous casualties. To be continued. The earth vein cannot be moved. Once moved, it will destroy its root cause and cannot last forever. So if you want a good earth vein, you can only obtain it by grabbing the land. However, there are always exceptions. There are some earth vein that exist in the underground for many years, because of some special reasons, the energy condenses, and finally converges into a special existence, that is, the earth vein bead. An earth vein bead is equivalent to an earth vein, which contains all the energy that an earth vein should have. Earth vein bead is also a very rare thing. Yang Kai has spent so many years in the home star territory, and he has only seen one in the Violet Star Treasury, and it was finally planted by him under the medicine garden of the mysterious small boundary to maintain the spiritual energy of the medicine garden and cultivate the spirit herbs. But at this moment, the flying bat actually collected as many as 4 from the ground. Yang Kai was overjoyed and quickly took it over and looked at it carefully. Soon, he discovered that these 4 earth vein beads were of higher grade than the ones he had brought from the Violet Star Treasury back then. Both the total amount of energy stored inside and the degree of purity were far from the Violet Star's one. If the earth vein bead obtained from the Violet Star Treasury are low grade, then the 4 in hand are at least medium grade, and the largest one should be of top grade. The spiritual energy that it exudes was so rich that Yang Kai was amazed. There were so many earth vein beads under the canyon, which made Yang Kai surprised and delighted. However, after careful consideration, Yang Kai felt that this was taken for granted. If it weren't for these earth vein beads, how could the world's spiritual energy here be so rich? Although heavy earth is precious, but it can't form such a rich world's spiritual energy, only the earth vein bead can. However, the existence of heavy earth is probably also the root cause of the formation of earth vein bead. The natural gravity field and its horror, the nearby world's spiritual energy naturally sinks to the bottom of the valley, gathering, condensing, and suppressing underground, and over the years, the earth vein beads are produced. The 5 Colors Treasure Tower has existed for a long time. The existence of this piece of ancient battlefield is also impossible to verify. For thousands of years, the world's spiritual energy attracted by the gravity field has formed these earth vein beads. This explanation is reasonable. Yang Kai just thought a little in his mind. He almost guessed the truth of the matter. Although the value of these earth vein beads is not as good as the heavy earth, but it's definitely not cheap. Even if it is put into a big sect, it is enough to raise the richness of the rod's spiritual energy inside it to a level. Yang Kai's flick his wrist and sent them to the bottom of the medicine garden of the mysterious small boundary, supplemented by the previous one. With 5 earth vein beads, plus so much heavy earth, the medicine garden in the mysterious small boundary can be said to be the best medicine garden in the star boundary. Yang Kai couldn't wait to cultivate some spirit herbs to see the effect. After half a day, Yang Kai sighed and gave up his plan to continue searching. It seems that all the benefits of the underground have been taken away. Without the heavy earth and the earth vein bead, the environment below the canyon has been restored to the same environment as other places. The world's spiritual energy is extremely thin, and it is not suitable for long stay. He just waved at the little beast, urged his strength, and flew upwards. Without the involvement of the natural gravity field, he flew into the canyon without difficulty. The flying bat continued to lead the way ahead, looking for Mo Zioki's trail, and Yang Kai unhurriedly followed behind. 3 days later, Yang Kai approached a small hill, suddenly glanced down, smiled coldly, stopped his pace, and said, "My friend, do you want to come out by yourself, or do you want me to force you out?" There was no movement below, only the sound of wind blowing leaves. Stubbornness. Yang Kai snorted coldly, and when he lifted his palm, a golden blood thread shot out, hitting a certain position below. At this moment, a blue light flashed below, welcoming the golden blood thread. With a bang, the golden blood thread was bounced back, and underneath, there was originally no one, but there was a middle-aged man sitting there cross-legged. His face was pale, he stared at Yang Kai with a bitter expression, his eyes were full of sorrow and murderous intention. Yang Kai was startled. With his eyesight, it was natural to see that the opponent was seriously injured at a glance, and it was not a normal injury, it seemed that the injury had already reached the root. This situation is completely different from what he had previously guessed. He thought that this person was hiding here and wanted to attack him sneakily, but he knew he was hiding here to heal his wounds, but he shot his whereabouts. For a moment, Yang Kai couldn't help but feel a little grim. But he was also a smart man. After realizing something was wrong, he hurriedly clasped his fists and said, "I'm sorry, it seems that there is some misunderstanding, friend, please don't blame me. You can continue to heal your injuries, I will leave now. Isn't my friend coming here to take my life? If you want to do it, hurry up, why bother faking mercy?" Something Yang Kai did not expect happened. After listening to Yang Kai's explanation, the middle-aged man did not relax his vigilance. Instead, he shouted angrily, as if Yang Kai really had some hatred of him. Yang Kai frowned and said, "My friend misunderstood me, and I don't know you, why should I take your life?" This matter was caused by a momentary mistake in the end, so the other party's attitude was bad, and Yang Kai didn't care. He took out a jade bottle and threw it at the person, saying, "This is a bottle of healing pills. Ease your situation." After speaking, he left immediately. The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. At this time, he seemed to realize that Yang Kai really didn't mean it. Otherwise, Yang Kai could kill him when he was weak. He stretched out his hand and took the jade bottle and opened the jade. Sniffed the bottle lightly, confirming that this was indeed a healing medicine, and the expression on his face suddenly struggled. Seeing that Yang Kai was about to go far away, this man finally made up his mind and said in a condensed voice, "Hold on." Yang Kai paused, looked back at him, and sighed, "What's the matter, my friend? Although I made the move and ruined your hiding place, but if you change the place there is no problem, I also compensate you a bottle of healing pills. Let's forget it, don't go too far." Hearing this, the middle-aged man didn't feel angry at all. Instead, he smiled mysteriously and whispered, "I'm not going to ask you about this matter." "Then what do you want?" Yang Kai looked a little impatient. "Do you want principal source fruit?" The middle-aged man stared at Yang Kai and said slowly. "What?" Yang Kai grumbled, and immediately turned around, with a few flashes, and came to the middle-aged man. He glanced at his space ring and said in a deep voice, "You just said principal source fruit?" "Exactly, my friend heard me right. I did say principal source fruit just now." The middle-aged man nodded. "You have principal source fruit?" Yang Kai looked at him with surprise. The middle-aged man nodded again, and said calmly, "Heavenly Martial Holy Land put 3 principal source fruits in 5 colors treasure tower this time, and Zhang was lucky enough to get one of them." Before Yang Kai could ask where the principal source fruit was, the middle-aged man named Zhang smiled slightly and said, "Friends don't have to worry about it. Even if you kill me, you won't get that principal source fruit. Before healing my injuries, I had hidden it in a safe place." Yang Kai couldn't help coughing, "Why would I kill you? It's hard to say." The man surnamed Zhang chuckled. My friend doesn't look like a big bully, otherwise he won't leave just now. I'm afraid you will already have the heart to kill people to take the treasure. But principal source fruit is extremely precious, especially for people like you and me. I can't guarantee that you can still go around me in front of such a treasure. What you said makes sense. Yang Kai nodded and agreed with him. Even if the general martial artist wouldn't take the initiative to kill people and win the treasures, whether he could still maintain his original mind in front of principal source fruit, such a rare spirit fruit, is really two things. But, you took the initiative to call me back and told me about principal source fruit, what do you want to do? Yang Kai looked at him suspiciously. Naturally I want to give the principal source fruit to the friend. The man surnamed Zhang said with a solemn expression. Are you kidding? Yang Kai squinted at him with an expression of disbelief. The man surnamed Zhang shook his head. I am about to die, and my words are true. Why would I be joking with you on this matter? Yang Kai narrowed his eyes and said lightly, I don't think you are going to die soon. The man surnamed Zhang gave a wry smile. I had burned out 80% of my blood essence in order to escape with my life. Even if I could survive, my cultivation level would have fallen drastically. What's more, I was poisoned and even the consciousness sea had been polluted. Yang Kai's expression changed, and he released his divine consciousness to investigate him carefully, only to confirm that the other party was not lying. This man surnamed Zhang was actually only look strong on the outside, holding the last bit of strength and staying alive. Perhaps he had taken some spirit pill before to support himself. Such an injury, even if no one interferes with him, he will not survive for 2 days. Yang Kai sighed, if you are only physically poisoned, I might still be able to help you, but even the consciousness sea is contaminated, I can't help it. Zhang is mentally prepared, friends don't need to care. The man surnamed Zhang was very easygoing, and smiled. I have never known you. Whether you live or die has nothing to do with me, but you called me back and said you want to give me principal source fruit. How can there be such a good thing in this world? Let's talk, what do you want? My friend is really a smart person. The man surnamed Zhang smiled and said, I don't have much time, so I will be straightforward. Yang Kai nodded and assumed a listening posture. I can give you the location of principal source fruit. After you take principal source fruit, after you find someone to make a spirit pill, you must give some to my Zhang family descendant. The man surnamed Zhang said, I am the head of the Zhang family in Maplewood City, Zhang Jiaoxuan. Although the Zhang family is not a big family in the Maplewood City, it has been around for hundreds of years in Maplewood City. After you go out, if you inquire a little bit, you will know the location of my Zhang family. After you take away the principal source fruit and refine it into a spirit pill, there will be nothing to say if it fails. If it succeeds, there will be at least 3 principal source pill, you only need to give 1 to my Zhang family descendant, and the rest belongs to you. To be continued. Hearing what Zhang Jiaoxuan said, Yang Kai nodded and said, this request is reasonable, and I agree, but, you are not afraid that I will not keep my promise? Zhang Jiaoxuan smiled bitterly, what about being afraid? I will die soon. If there is no suitable entrusted person, the principal source fruit will only exist in this 5-color pagoda. My Zhang family will not get the slightest benefit, so I have only one choice. It's a pity that I don't have the divine soul contract, otherwise I don't have to worry about it. Then, do you want me to take a vow? Yang Kai grinned. Zhang Jiaoxuan glanced at him and said lightly, forget it, such thing like vow. Hehe, I really can't help it, and I see my friend's temperament is pretty good, so I did this. In addition, after my friend went out, I would like to invite my friend to sit in Zhang family for 10 years. 10 years? Yang Kai snorted coldly, my friend can really talk big. Is it too much for 10 years? Zhang Jiaoxuan looked at Yang Kai with a surprised look, you know, what I gave you is a principal source fruit, for general martial artist. Even if you spend your entire life energy, you will never be able to see it. With it, your chance of being promoted to principal source stage will be increased by at least 40% to 50%. As long as my friend's aptitude is not too bad, promotion is definitely a solid matter. Yang Kai said lightly, to be honest, I can be promoted without principal source fruit, so this thing is not too attractive to me. My friend is talking big. Zhang Jiaoxuan was a little shocked this time, and looked up and down Yang Kai, wanting to see if he was playing mystery, but unfortunately, Yang Kai looked calm. After a long while, he sighed and said, "It seems that your aptitude are indeed extraordinary, and even principal source fruit can't make your heart beat. That's it, if 10 years is too much, then 3 years." Yang Kai shook his head. Zhang Jiaoxuan's expression changed, and he said with dissatisfaction, "Then what do you want? It's only 3 years. For someone like you and me, the Third Order Void King realm, it's not long at all. This condition is already loose enough." Yang Kai laughed and said, "This is not a question of 10 years or 3 years. I don't want to be bound by time, even 1 year. Because I can't tell how long I will stay in Maplewood City. If there is something that caused me to leave Maplewood City, isn't it a bad agreement and leaving a heart demon in my heart? I won't do this kind of loss-making business." This. Zhang Jiaoxuan was startled. There was a slight smile. It seems that Zhang was right. My friend should be a person who keeps promises. Yang Kai will bargain with him, which meant that he really wanted to make the deal and would abide by each other's agreement. Otherwise, why would Yang Kai bother so much? He just agreed, and he can ignore it afterwards. The heart demon mentioned by Yang Kai also gave Zhang Jiaoxuan some confidence in him. If you are not someone who will keep the promise, it is absolutely impossible to give birth to a heart demon because of a broken agreement. Well, I can promise you that during my time in Maplewood City, I will help your Zhang family a little bit under the conditions that I can. If your Zhang family asks too much, I will not agree. Yes, and they only have 3 opportunities to ask my help." Yang Kai thought about it and said. 3 times. Zhang Jiaoxuan was lost in thought, and it took a long time before he raised his head and said, "Well, just as you said, 3 times is 3 times. However, I need you to bring a message to my Zhang family." "This is fine." Yang Kai nodded. The two had settled on this matter. Right now, Yang Kai waited quietly while Zhang Jiaoxuan took out a piece of jade slip and poured his spiritual mind into it, obviously leaving some last words. After a while, everything was in order. Zhang Jiaoxuan handed the jade slip to Yang Kai and watched him solemnly put it away. Then he took a long breath and said, "I will leave everything to my friend." "The location of principal source fruit?" Yang Kai asked. Zhang Jiaoxuan smiled slightly and stretched out his hand to point out, "Did you see the hill on the opposite side? Principal source fruit is there, the specific location." Having said this, Zhang Jiaoxuan suddenly lost his voice, but he transmitted the location with his spiritual mind. Yang Kai quickly understood. "Friend, take Zhang's space ring back to Zhang's house, I have no use for it anymore." Zhang Jiaoxuan slowly withdrew the space ring from his hand and threw it to Yang Kai. An hour later, Yang Kai came to the opposite mountain peak, and according to the tips given by Zhang Jiaoxuan, he found the place where he had hidden principal source fruit. "Really careful enough," Yang Kai muttered to himself. The patriarch of the Zhang family not only hid the principal source fruit elsewhere, but also placed a restriction on the place where the fruit is hidden. This restriction must be guided by his own blood essence to open it safely. If it is broken with brute force, the restriction force will destroy the principal source fruit. In other words, if someone really wants to act disadvantageous to Zhang Jiaoxuan and even force him to tell the whereabouts of principal source stage, it would not be possible to succeed without him taking the initiative to take out the blood essence. The end result will only be to steal chickens while losing the rice. But after Zhang Jiaoxuan was seriously injured, after taking out a drop of blood, the situation got worse. Yang Kai estimated that he would be lucky to live another day. "I'm afraid he will not make it in half a day." Using Zhang Jiaoxuan's previous method of breaking the restriction, he used his blood essence as a guide to instill the restriction. After a while, the power of restriction disappeared, and a beautiful wooden box appeared on the spot. Yang Kai stretched out his hand and sucked in the wooden box and slowly opened it. Suddenly, a golden fruit about the size of an apricot was printed in the eyes, and the fragrance was pleasant to the nose, and the smell seemed to be contain some magical powers, allowing the martial artist to more clearly feel the power of the laws of the world around him. Principal source fruit is used to refine principal source pill, and it is not surprising that it has such an effect to assist martial artists to promote to principal source stage. However, Yang Kai found that this principal source fruit was a little dry. It seemed that it had been a long time since it was picked, and there was a little sign of medicinal properties passing away. Heavenly Martial Holy Land. Yang Kai slowly shook his head, deep in his heart that he couldn't help but feel a hint of slander for the top sect of the South Territory. Before the martial artist of Maplewood City heard that Heavenly Martial Holy Land had put 3 principal source fruits into the 5 colors treasure tower, they were crazy. But now that he really got it, Yang Kai discovered that this principal source fruit was definitely a defective product in the Heavenly Martial Holy Land storage. Think about it, if it is really a principal source fruit of good quality, Heavenly Martial Holy Land will not bear to take it out. However, even if it is a defective product, it is also a principal source fruit, and there is absolutely no problem in refining it into principal source pill. That is the case, the amount of pill produced may be slightly lower. After carefully collecting the principal source fruit, Yang Kai leapt up and disappeared into the void. 2 days later, under the leadership of the Flying Bat, Yang Kai came to a barren valley. After arriving here, the little beast seemed to be extremely happy. With a slight shake, it got into the soil and moved forward at an extremely fast speed. After a while, it came to the back of a soil slope. Yang Kai frowned, letting out his spiritual mind to perceive the front carefully. Before he could see a clue, Mo Zioki's voice came in his ear, "Brother Yang." Yang Kai narrowed his eyes and followed the voice to determine Mo Zioki's position, but he couldn't see her at all. She seemed to have used some secret technique to completely hide her whereabouts. While in Jade Clear Mountain, Yang Kai discovered that Mo Zioki's concealment technique was extraordinary. It seems that he still underestimated her methods. He don't know what she is acting so mysteriously. Yang Kai also shook his figure, using the secret technique Nihility, condensing his aura, and walked forward step by step. After a while, Yang Kai walked to the front of the slope and looked over it carefully. Only then did he find a trace. He couldn't help but smile and said, "Zioki, what are you hiding here for?" "Hush!" Mo Zioki put an index finger up to her mouth, motioning Yang Kai to look forward. Yang Kai was puzzled, squatted down quietly, followed the direction Mo Zioki signaled, and glanced over there. Upon seeing it, Yang Kai was surprised. Because in the place about 10 miles ahead, there are many martial artists gathered around. With a rough count, there are as many as dozens, sitting cross-legged in groups of 3 or 5 on the ground, each using their methods to infuse their own strength in the center. "What are they doing?" Yang Kai asked in a low voice. "I don't know, it seems that they have discovered some restriction. They want to work together to break it." Mo Zioki replied softly. "Oh?" Yang Kai suddenly became interested. "If there is a restriction, doesn't it mean that there are treasures? Why didn't you join in the fun?" Mo Zioki frowned, shook her head and said, "I feel that something is not right, there may not be a treasure in the restriction." "It's not a treasure?" Yang Kai was surprised. "I don't know, so I'm watching it here." Mo Zioki replied naturally. Yang Kai couldn't help being speechless, but he was also curious about what restrictions were there, and it took so many Void King realm to work together to crack it. Generally speaking, the greater the power of the restriction, the more extraordinary the thing hidden in it. The restriction that requires dozens of Void King realms' efforts to crack, the treasures hidden inside are at least principal source grade treasures, maybe even Emperor grade. No wonder so many people can work together safely. "What do you think is wrong?" Yang Kai asked after thinking about it. Even if it is more than 10 miles, but there are so many martial artists over there, he didn't dare to release his spiritual mind to investigate, so as not to expose his whereabouts. "I can't tell you, the closer I get to the other side, the more panicked I feel, as if there is some danger." Mo Zioki replied seriously. "Are you sure?" Yang Kai's expression changed. Generally speaking, martial artists have their own instinct, this kind of induction is not clear, but once it appears, it shows that the martial artist will really encounter something. Mo Zioki came from an extraordinary background. Since she felt this way, it meant that the restriction over there might have sealed something dangerous. "I'm still panicking now." Mo Zioki patted her chest with her small hand, "Moreover, the little bat also feels this way." To be continued. Of course Yang Kai knew that the little bat in her mouth was the flying bat that led him all the way. This little thing was naturally sensitive to dangers. Thanks to it, Yang Kai avoided many restrictions and traps along the way. Since Mo Zioki and even the little beast feel this way, it shouldn't be wrong. Right now, Yang Kai didn't say anything anymore, and the two of them concealed their figure in the distance, and watched secretly. This look made Yang Kai discover an interesting place. It was the martial artist hiding around watching. Not only him and Mo Zioki, but also some guys who used secret techniques to hide the body's aura. Either hiding in the void, or hiding in an unknown place, all looking forward. Over there, dozens of Void King realms cracking restrictions seemed to have been going on for quite a while, each of them consume a lot of energy, and one after another took out spirit pills and stuffed them into the mouth. And continued to crack the restriction while refining the medicine effect and recovering. With the power of dozens of people poured in, a cross-shaped sign glowing with fluorescence, burning like a flame, gradually appeared in the center where they gathered. The scorching power fluctuation came from there. Roaring Flames Cruise Seal? Mozoyoki suddenly muttered softly after seeing this scene. Do you recognize it? Yang Kai asked quietly. Mozoyoki nodded gently. I have seen it in ancient books. It is an ancient sealing technique, and no one knows how to use it now. The principle of this kind of seal is very simple, but it requires very powerful assistance to be done, and I don't know what is sealed underneath. We'll know in a while. Yang Kai took another sentence. And 10 miles ahead, when the Roaring Flames Cruise seal appeared, the dozens of martial artists who were breaking the seal were suddenly excited, and some even shouted, "Everyone, work hard, the restriction is about to break, and the treasure is about to appear." With a single word, the enthusiasm of the martial artist was thoroughly aroused, and each martial artist desperately agitated their own strength, and continuously poured in that center. As time passed, the shape of the Roaring Flames cross seal became more complete and clearer. And with the infusion of a lot of power, this Roaring Flames cross seal also seemed to be gradually unable to bear. The burning flames began to riot, and there was a crackling sound inside the seal. At a certain moment, the Roaring Flames cross seal trembled suddenly, in a distorted illusion. It suddenly shrank toward the center. The next moment, there was a loud bang. Countless flames are flying all around. The violent force stirred up heat wave and shocks, and flew out to the dozens of Void King realm. Fortunately, everyone was prepared. One after another sacrificed the defensive treasures, so although everyone looked distressed, no one was injured. The restriction is broken. Someone yelled, with a surprise in his voice. The rest of the people looked forward, and they all were moved in their hearts. In the place where the restriction originally existed, the Roaring Flames cross seal has disappeared. Instead, a big pit appeared on the ground, dark and seemingly bottomless. The many Void King realm martial artists who had just stabilized their bodies were still restrained, and all of them swayed, rushing towards the big pit at a very fast speed, trying to snatch the treasure in the first step. Everyone's ideas coincided with each other. Suddenly, many people rushed to the big pit, looked at each other, hostility grew, and in an instant, around the big pit, a good show of melee was staged. They originally joined forces temporarily because they wanted to break the restriction. Now that the restriction has been broken, there is no need to join forces anymore. There are even some martial artists who are hiding in the dark to watch the good show, showing their bodies one after another, rushing towards the big hole. Yang Kai and Mozoyoki stood still, and a few careful guys did not show up. Not far in front, the light quickly shined, the power of artifacts and martial skills was revealed, and people were injured and fallen from time to time. In this chaos, a few people quickly rushed into the big pit. When other people saw this, how could they hesitate? They gave up their opponents and pursued them likewise. For a while, above the big pit, there were only a few martial artists with red eyes, and all the others chased into the pit. It's so lively here. Suddenly, a voice appeared not far from where Yang Kai and Mozoyoki were hiding. Yang Kai was shocked, because although he had been paying attention to the situation on the other side, he did not relax his vigilance around him. He didn't notice anyone approaching him at all, and he didn't become vigilant until the sound rang. Turning his head to look, Yang Kai couldn't help but narrow his eyes. On his right-hand side, there was an awkward-looking, sloppy old man with a goatee, who did not know when he appeared there, one hand stroking his beard while the other hand was in his back, and squinted his eyes to look forward. People die for money and birds die for food, why bother? The old man suddenly muttered in a low voice, with an unpredictable look. At this moment, the old man gave him a feeling of floating in the dust, making Yang Kai surprised. It's this old liar. Mozoyoki also spotted the incoming person. After seeing his appearance, she was furious, and immediately showed her figure to teach the old guy who had deceived her a lesson. Yang Kai waved his hand at her. Although Mozoyoki didn't know why Yang Kai wanted to stop her, she nodded obediently. At this moment, the goatee old man took a step forward and came to a few tens of feet away under the blur of his figure. Then he squatted down and looked at the Void King realm in front of him with missing arms and legs. This martial artist was severely injured in the melee just now, and even his limbs were cut off in half. He finally escaped with his life, and finally fell down here with exhaustion. The blood was pouring out like a fountain, which was spectacular. "Brother, you are hurt very badly." The goatee old man stared at the other person, with a pitiful expression on his face, like a bodhisattva who rescued people from suffering. Old mister, save me." The martial artist stretched out his remaining arm and desperately grabbed it at the old man, begging hard. Saving a life is better than slaughter. The old man can't ignore it. This severed limb injury is not so easy to deal with. If it is not handled properly, you will be disabled for a lifetime in the future. Tisk tisk, it is really pitiful. But fortunately, the old man has an ancestral spirit pill, the 9 revolutions resurrection pill, which is enough for repairing the flesh, bones, and dying stage. The old man sees that this is a fateful encounter, so I will sell it to you cheaply. As the old man said this, he mysteriously took out 1 spirit pill from the space ring. The martial artist's eyes lit up, as if he had seen a life-saving straw while drowning. He nodded repeatedly and said, I will buy, how much source crystal do I need to pay? It's not expensive, just give me your space ring. The old man said with a smile on his face. When the words fell, he shoved the so-called 9 revolutions resurrection pill in his hand into the martial artist's mouth, and then unceremoniously took off the space ring in his hand. The martial artist hadn't reacted yet, and the deal had been concluded, and he rolled his eyes suddenly and fainted directly. Go to sleep, take a good night's sleep, when you wake up, nothing is lost. The old man grinned, and smiled as if chanting, showing a big yellow teeth. Big brother Yang, look at this old guy, he actually started robbing things, it's too much. Mo Zioki suddenly filled with outrage. She and Yang Kai hid in the dark, seeing what the old man did. She always thought this old guy was just a liar, but now it seems that not only he likes to deceive people, but also commits robbery. How can this make Mo Zioki able to bear? Excessive indeed. Yang Kai nodded sternly. I'll teach him a lesson. Mo Zioki exclaimed, revealing her figure. But before she could do anything, the earth shook suddenly, and there was a rumbling sound from the ground, like a muffled thunder. Yang Kai and Mo Zioki's expressions changed at the same time. Before they could find out what was going on, flowing light shot out in a panic from the big hole 10 miles away. It was those martial artists who rushed in to fight for treasures before. When these martial artists rushed in, there were dozens of people, but now only half of them came back alive, and all of them were wounded, with a panic expression, as if they had seen a ghost in the day. After getting out of the big pit, they kept the stature, fleeing out frantically. In the blink of an eye, many martial artists disappeared from the vision of Yang Kai and Mo Zioki. What happened underground? Mo Zioki exclaimed. The situation is not right, retreat quickly. Yang Kai made a decisive decision and wanted to take Mo Zioki away from this ghost place. Under his perception, he vaguely sensed a powerful life fluctuation underground and quickly woke up. The speed is simply unbelievable, and the fluctuation is so strong that he has no plans to rival it. Click! Suddenly there was a cracking sound from the earth, and in the blink of an eye, large and small crisscrossing cracks appeared on the ground with a radius of tens of miles around the big pit. This is not over yet. From the cracks, there are rows of green vines. These vines seems to have their own life, constantly twisting and wriggling, growing crazily, and in an instant, this range of tens of miles around is like a swarm of demons dancing, looking terrifying. Yang Kai and Mo Zioki had already taken a leap into the air. And just as they moved, a vine with the thickness of an arm suddenly appeared under their feet. The tip of the vine was sharp like a sword, and a thorn pierced the location where Yang Kai and Mo Zioki were before. It is conceivable that if the two people's previous movements were a little slower, they would have already fallen into a hard fight. Ah! Suddenly a scream came. Yang Kai was surprised and turned his head to look. Not far away, a martial artist who had been hiding in the void was pierced by a sharp vine. Hanging in the air. This martial artist is also at the level of Void King realm, but no matter how hard he struggles at this moment, he can't get rid of the shackles of the vines. In the blink of an eye, more vines wrapped around him tightly. To be continued.